Hi, this is Dan Tortorici with Axway, and I manage API product marketing for Axway. And this is the first in a series of webinars with Shockoe, and I'm pleased today to have Alex from Shockoe to help us basically with our subject. Alex, a few words about you?
Thank you, Dan. As Dan mentioned, I'm Alex Othanius, one of the partners at Shockoe, Axway's premier mobile and API service provider. As Dan mentioned, we're here today to talk to you guys about the value of enterprise APIs and the API platform as it relates to mobile strategies and the connected world. Before we start, I really wanted to focus on the customer. The customer is the most important thing of the API. The customers are what is demanding or what are demanding this transformation into API management. The way Shockoe and Axway really define customers are, it's really the product of the interaction between an organization and its customers. Customers can really be defined as end users, those people that are really buying your product or relating with your brand from an end user perspective. They could also be employees or partners. Employees or partners are sometimes overlooked as a user or a customer of technology. So when we define customers here at Shockoe, we really define them in three ways. One, what is that customer journey that customer is going through? The different touch points that the customer will interact with, and the environments that customer will experience. So all of these things are essential to understand when building an API portfolio. It will help you and your customers, as well as the entire IT and development team, understand how to build that portfolio and create an adequate strategy for that. As we move forward, before we continue into enterprise APIs, I really wanted to describe the different personas. As I mentioned, a lot of times we tend to focus on the IT side of things when we talk APIs. So API platforms are truly or have truly been a focus for IT managers, enterprise architects, directors of technology and engineering teams. From an IT perspective, we think somebody that focuses on information systems, the workflow, the architecture, essential for maintaining and deploying that API platform. From a technology perspective or from a development perspective, those people that focus on the actual build of the API, connecting to these specific systems or exposing that data are essential. What people forget about or tend to forget about are the people on the other side, the operations team, the sales teams, the marketing teams, and the creative teams. Here at Shockoe, when we really focus on API platforms, we focus on all these stakeholders. These are the project stakeholders that are really important to and essential to the API strategy. So if you think of an operations team, think about somebody that's in a warehouse using an application. Think of a mobile app or think about Google Glass or think about a connected product. If they don't have the right exposed data at the right time with the right security levels, their jobs are going to fail. What they don't realize is that they are relying on that API strategy, on that exposure of data at the right time. From a sales perspective, think about an outside salesperson, a traveling sales rep that needs to show a customer specific data points or specific images. These people, again, are not only relying on the mobile application or the tablet or the PC that they're using, they're relying on that API to transfer that data to the right person at the right time. From a creative perspective, probably one of the most overlooked people or pieces of the puzzle, creative teams build a user experience and interface around that API. They need to make sure that when they're building that end user experience or that user interface, that the data is going to come across seamlessly. Imagine having a user experience and the data being dropped. That's why APIs are essential. That's why that strategy is important, and that's what we focus on here at Shockoe. As I mentioned, APIs are really focused on driving engagement for your users. You have two really good people here on the call. As you can see here from a flow, backend services expose data. From an API management perspective, you could create, control, and consume data that is being exposed through a backend service. You also have legacy systems. When you're doing migrations, one of the things that people forget about is the complexity of migrating from a legacy system to a cloud-based system or to a new platform. With an API strategy, one can decrease downtime in a system or from an end user perspective by simply having an API strategy that connects both to a legacy system as well as their new cloud-based system. The third thing that has been extremely popular over the last few years, especially with some of our clients, is exposing information to third parties. Yes, a lot of people are hesitant to do that, but by exposing information such as customer information and or specific pieces of information that third-party users can take advantage of, increases your ability to access that outside world or that outside user. As I mentioned, here on today's call, we have two really important people. We have Dan from Axway, part of the platform. He could really dive into this platform experience and the functionality of the platform. And you have myself, one of the service providers for Axway, that could really relate to some of these service engagements that we've come across. Dan, one of the things that I really get asked a lot is, where do you see APIs making the most impact? I'm not sure if you could give us a few examples or a few stories that you've come across.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and certainly it's pretty critical because business value is where it's all at. I think one of the things I like about what you were just saying on this particular slide is, the various pieces that make this up, and they're all important, right? And so, from a perspective of a vendor perspective like Axway, we look to basically satisfy the needs of all those constituencies. And let me give you a little bit more detail on that. So we do that essentially with a platform, and our platform is Amplify, and here we're looking at it in the context of API management. And in order to have that completeness that can address all the various types of projects and initiatives that you might have that involve APIs, it's really critical that you have the foundation of services that provides the security, that you have lifecycle management for APIs, right? As well as the ability to create apps and to really deliver that API functionality to the edge wherever it may be, whether it's mobile apps or wearables or the devices of the future. And along with that, then you'll see here on the right the analytics and monitoring. So clearly, you need to be able to know what all of these different aspects are accomplishing, right? And that's what we've looked to provide. And so from a value perspective, these four things, really help with various parts of, what we call really the digital business value chain. So that app development, delivering, the ability to take those APIs and provide value to the end user. But it's also increasing developer productivity because it uses a very innovative cross-platform, mobile development model. And I know Alex is certainly familiar with that. And then we've got, really the lifecycle management for APIs, which is all about the people and processes, basically, of APIs, from creation through retirement, right? And then certainly, to these days, security just is never enough, right? So you've got to have not only the right data security and identity information, but also the ability then to, connect to the silos that you have to use that information in relevant ways and solve the, the customer challenge. And then lastly, as I said, analytics to really measure and monitor success and what you need to do to achieve that. So if we take those four areas and kind of expand them a bit, right, here's what you see. You can kind of see some of the functionality that's in it. I think one of the things that's also sort of key is that from a platform perspective, you can also deploy this just about any way you want. So on the Axway cloud, on your on-premise, or in a hybrid situation, right? Additionally, we also have a developer community. We have a number of communities that can bring resources and tools to help sort of development effort, and a marketplace where accelerators basically can be, downloaded from that enable, a faster path to development. Right? So if we look at this sort of in the construct of, those personas, more or less that Alex talked about earlier, I like to look at them in this construct of a value chain, right? Value chains have been around forever. Each step in the value chain adds value on the way to delivering a product or service, right? So, starting from enterprise systems and the integration team that, manages the ability to get those services out, and back in the old SOA days probably developed about 5,000 services, right? You have then an API team that, has one eye towards what's available there, but also another eye towards the developer and the developer's needs, right, whether it's internal or partner or, any open developer. And so, developing that API that enables basically all the good stuff to happen and the value delivered to the user. So, in sort of, that chain of value, if you will, we believe that Axway and Amplify provides a very unique solution, right? So, this is sort of from the top down, the products, if you will, and an overview of where we fit. Alex, I think you were going to drill down into a few more details in terms of feature areas that you were particularly interested in. Alex?
Thank you, Dan. As you mentioned, there's a couple areas or pieces of functionality that, as a service provider, we're really excited about. The first one, and probably the best one in my opinion, is really the API builder. Not only have we worked with clients teaching them how to use API builder and its functionality, we've created several training courses and certifications in partnership with Axway. The great things about API builder, and it's the reason it stands out in the industry, is simply the graphical UI that one gets when building APIs. The nice thing about this is people that understand how API work and understand how back-end systems are set up can build APIs without writing a single line of code. On top of that, there's this object relationship model for API endpoints that allows one to import a lot of different information, understand what pieces of information you're connecting to, and surface those to third-party systems, to mobile applications, or connected devices. Talking about connected devices and talking about third-party systems, there are pre-built connectors set up within the environment that you can access to simply expose data. So think about Salesforce or think about SQL. One of the things Axway has really done is enabled this process to be easier. Connect to something like Salesforce, extract the data, and pick the different value fields that you want to expose. One of my favorite things is really that Swagger JSON file that can be exported as part of that API definition. So if you're a developer and you're trying to document everything for your stakeholders, being able to export or import that Swagger JSON file is extremely important, Swagger or JSON. The final thing that I really wanted to touch on this is with API Builder, it was part of the Accelerator suite of family, now part of Amplify. The great thing about that is it's really integrated with API management and allows for automatic API ingestion. So once you create that API, it can automatically be integrated with the whole API management process. So forget about creating a Swagger file first, understanding how to build it, developing it, importing it into an API management platform. It's an all-in-one comprehensive platform that allows you to understand your endpoint as well as the database that you're integrating with and build that in one system. As I mentioned, once we get into the API management functionality, this is probably the area where enterprises take the most advantage or should be taking the most advantage of. With a central catalog of APIs available to virtually anybody based on role and authorization, it saves time and allows you to consume different APIs or different set of data for different purposes. So what we've run into a lot is, as an enterprise, people are building different APIs, exposing the same set of data over and over and over. By having a central catalog available to all development teams within an organization as well as third-party providers, it becomes easy to manage those APIs. Consuming those APIs and setting security and permission rights within that management permission. Again, as I mentioned, one of the biggest benefits is you could connect to applications like Salesforce, like Oracle, to SQL databases with one click and expose those APIs to your entire enterprise, again, based on permission. It really addresses that complex integration scenario and decreases the need to build custom solutions and custom APIs. One of the things that one of our directors tends to say is APIs are still in the wild, wild west where people are building APIs as they need, whether it's on Node.js or on a specific platform that they have a trial for. This really allows you to centralize all of that, manage it, maintain it, and treat it more like a product. So what's up next? So we've talked to you about some of the functionality and values that an API management platform brings. I really mentioned and pushed this point about treating APIs like a product. Traditionally speaking, a lot of stakeholders and businesses that we work with treat APIs as a necessary evil to expose data to their end solution. If you switch that perspective around and switch that mentality around, whether you're a creative director or an IT director or a developer, and start treating APIs like a product, the whole process becomes easier. One of the other things that we've started doing is really targeting developers. Developers need to understand not only how to build the front-end component of a system, but the full stack. If you target developers, train them how to use APIs, train them how to read APIs, and train them how to use Swagger files or some sort of documentation method, the development process becomes easier. One of the things that we're going to be talking about in the next series, and really over the next 2 series, is how to develop and design best practices for API management and development, and really prepare for that full life cycle. As Dan will probably cover in a following series, DevOps. DevOps is a hugely popular term and one that's also being used for API management. As people start exposing more data, building more APIs in the enterprise, and managing that security process, managing the different versions of APIs, DevOps becomes essential to the success of an API strategy. That being said, I wanted to leave you with a few key takeaways from today's presentation. The first one is make sure your API strategy accounts for internal and external consumption. So remember I mentioned customers. Customers can be both users employees as well as end consumers. So most people tend to focus on the consumers, the people that buy your products or generate revenue. Well, if you start focusing on employees, you can start focusing and managing that productivity and saving some money from a bottom line perspective. The final thing that I wanted you to encourage, or final thing I wanted to encourage you to do, is think of API strategies as it relates to IoT, immersive media. One of the things that Shockoe is really focused on is really virtual reality, augmented reality, and a lot of the newer concepts that are bringing media to life, immersive media. The second thing, or the second takeaway that Dan really focused on, was really defining a clear separation between creating an API, controlling an API, and consuming an API. So when you create an API, you have a developer that's really creating an API, whether it's with Builder through a Swagger file or actually creating it on Node.js. The second thing is a platform like API management will allow you to control who consumes that API. And having a clear separation of who controls it and who develops it is important for all enterprises. Pay attention to the data quality and usage. So from a user experience perspective, we have to understand what data is being exposed to people. It's a critical part to security. It's a critical part to the user experience. If people are consuming data quicker than you could expose it, the user experience is not going to be as good. Having a platform like Amplify, having an API management platform, and having those analytics at your disposal are essential to the success of an enterprise API program. DevOps. Automate the API management lifecycle as much as possible. So by having a DevOps process where you have either continuous integration or you have some sort of design, deploy, and consume process is essential. Making sure that you can automate that process, whether it's deploying the APIs, consuming the APIs, managing the APIs, or receiving notifications about downtime or any issues, is extremely essential in today's world. Talking about essential and quickness, agile and fail-fast methodologies. So if you start treating APIs like a product, one of the things that we do is 2-week or 1-week sprints. Make sure that you're building APIs prior to actually deploying the product or before you finish the development of the actual product. APIs should be built in parallel to the product building process. Fail fast, make sure that your data is being consumed, and if you can't consume it or if there's a failure, make sure you go back to the drawing board. By having an agile process, you could iterate until it is well done and complete. I want to finish with this. Increase the awareness around APIs and API management around your organization. As I mentioned early in the presentation, most of the focus has been around IT management and technology, or the development and engineering teams. Remember, marketing, creatives, operations teams, and sales teams are extremely important, and their knowledge of what APIs are and what API management can do for them and their products, having them aware of the value add is extremely important to the success of any engagement. So if you start from a development perspective, really raising awareness of APIs and API management, the success rate is going to increase dramatically. Dan, any final takeaways from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that, pretty much hits, the key aspects here. I particularly like, what you were saying before about not ignoring, all the audiences, internal, as well as external. We found that there's a lot of value that basically is untapped that you start to see when you enable your internal folks to use these resources and APIs. Many times they wind up creating tools to solve a problem they have just in their own job. So, I think that's great, and you've hit basically the top key areas here. So that's my 2 cents.
So one of the things that we ask all of our customers or all of our audience to do is really ask their customers. We have significant success stories. We have a lot of success stories. A lot of our customers are happy with us, not only from a product perspective, the Axway Amplify platform, but from a service perspective. Understanding how to build APIs, understanding how to manage APIs, and really understanding the benefit to the enterprise has been essential to all of these customers. So as you start talking to your peers, as you start talking to your customers, as you start talking to different business units, ask them to reference us. Ask them to check some of our customers out. If you'd like, Dan and I will be here to answer any questions. We could reference any one of these customers and see if we could provide you additional information. That being said, I really wanted to finish off with a little bit about who we are. So Shockoe has been a service provider since about 2010. Shockoe started as a mobile enterprise solution provider. We built applications for the enterprise. That's all we've ever done. We also have been a training development partner for Axway. So not only do we build those solutions for the enterprise, we also build a lot of the training and certification programs that Axway offers. So we are working with our customers to teach them how to build APIs, teach them how to build mobile solutions, and more recently really help build AR and VR products. But we also train them. We train those developers. 2012 was an important year when we started introducing consumer services or consulting services and strategy. And then in 2016, when Axway acquired one of our biggest partners, Accelerator, we joined that Axway team. And we started focusing on that customer experience alignment, started focusing on what the customers wanted and defining who the customers were. Not only employees, not only partners, and not only consumers, but the whole customer experience. Finally, as I mentioned, immersive experiences, immersive media, IoT. A lot of these things are starting to come to reality. Enterprises are really focused on using immersive media as a productivity tool, not just a game. So Shockoe has been at the front end of that, working with clients to build AR solutions, to build VR solutions, to use beacons to expose data, and really build that connected user experience.
Yeah, and let me kind of wrap with a few words about Axway. Axway's been around 15 years or so, and we've been basically supplying technology for the enterprise challenges of the day. And we've got a substantial customer base, a good-sized company, and lots of developers basically in that developer community. I think we're over 1 million now. So we've done quite well by addressing the needs of the enterprise. And I think today with our Amplify platform, we're positioned well to help you with your challenges today and certainly going into tomorrow. So with that, I'd like to thank you for attending and thanking Alex for joining us.